We're now going to build the WebViewer application. So watch me perform these steps right now in Android Studio, and the code will also be shared on Blackboard. So we're going to start Android Studio, and we're going to build this entire app from scratch. And I'm also going to show you guys how to share the project on GitHub. So Android Studio is starting. And we're going to create a new Android project, and we're going to call it the WebViewer app, or we'll call it WebViewer UCSD for UCSD extension. So it opened up my previous app, the Welcome app, but I'm going to go back. I'm going to close this project, and I'm going to click on Start a New Android Studio Project, WebViewer UCSD. And click Next. Click on Next to select the default minimum API 15. So keep the default empty activity. Leave the default main activity for the activity name. And then it's going to start and start a new project where I can go in and make all the changes that I need to build the WebViewer application. So in the main method, it overrides the onCreate method, and not only does it override it, it also calls the onCreate method of the parent class so that it doesn't lose any of the functionality. And in addition to it, we're going to set the content to r.layout.activity_main, and that layout is located in the res folder for resources /layout activity_main.xml. Let's open that file. And we see that default Hello World program that's there. I'm going to go ahead and change the name of Hello World to something different. I'm going to click on the ellipses button. And create a new string resource, a new string value. Call it, this is a text view WebViewer. And we'll just call it select a website to, or just select a website. Simple as that. Click OK. I'm going to move this up slightly, and I'm going to make the font size a little bit bigger by going to the properties and scrolling down to text size. And we'll just make it, that looks like a good size right there. And I'm going to add 2 buttons now. Let's put one button right in the middle, right there. And drag another button right below it. And if you can kind of see these little grid lines that it creates to help you center things on your layout. So for this button, let's make it go to one website and make the other button go to another website. So to do that, I'm going to first give that button a name. So let's go to the buttons properties. And when you have a component selected, you're already at the properties page for that component. So let's go to the button and let's change its name. So we'll go to text, and we'll do the same thing. Select add a new resource, new string value. Button, let's just go to yahoo.com. Call this button Yahoo, and the name on the button will say Yahoo. And the next button, we'll make it go to UCSD extension. So we'll do the same thing. We'll select that component. We'll find the name of the button, which property that it's in. That's in the text property. Select add a new resource, new string value. We'll call it button UCSD. UCSD is the value. UCSD extension. So there's that second button. Now these buttons don't do anything. So in order for us to tie them into our app, we have to actually add some Java code in the main activity. But we can run the app now and see the buttons and see our app and see how the progress we're making so far. So let's try that out and run it on the Nexus 6 emulator. So while that's starting up, we're going to go to the main activity, and you'll see that it's setting the content to activity_main. This is where we added that text and the 2 buttons. But while it's doing that, I'm going to declare 2 buttons right above the onCreate method. So I'm going to say button, we'll call it, and we'll declare the 2 buttons. And by the way, once you start using a new class in Android and it hasn't been imported yet, you'll get a little pop-up that says, do you want to import this from android.widget.button? And you do. So press Alt-Enter on your keyboard and it'll automatically add that import statement for you. If you expand the import statements, you'll see it right there on the bottom. Import android.widget.button. So let's declare the button. We called it Yahoo button, and the other one was UCSD button. I believe that's what I called it. What's the button ID? So this button ID is button Yahoo, and this other button ID is button UCSD. So let's stick with that theme and let's rename these 2, button Yahoo and button UCSD. So now let's check the emulator and see what the app looks like before we start implementing these buttons. So the emulator looks like the buttons didn't appear where we wanted them to be. And I think that's because we didn't specify a layout. So this button should be here, and then there was a button Yahoo that's hidden. So let's go back to the activity main.xml and let's give it a layout. I'm going to select linear layout, the vertical one, and I'm going to drag and drop it underneath constraint layout. And I'm going to add all my components to it. So just drag and drop them right over the linear layout. And let me change the ordering. And the reason that it all looks like it's all on the left hand side is because I need to set the properties of linear layout to match the parent. So let's go to the layout width, select match parent, and then it fills it up horizontally. And that looks good. It looks good enough for me. So now let's save this and rerun it and see if that looks okay in our emulator so far. So that should restart the app. And that looks a lot better. So let's now make these buttons work. So the first thing we want to do is create our buttons. So we declared them. So let's go back in the code in the main activity.xml. We declared these 2 buttons. Now let's go inside the onCreate method and let's create these buttons. So let's say button Yahoo, and we need to assign it to a button cast button. Find view by ID, and we pass in the ID of that button, which is for resources.id.button, and you can see the little pop-up help comes up, and there's button Yahoo. Press semicolon, and let's declare the other button for the UCSD. Button UCSD, and do the same thing. Cast it as a button because it doesn't know what type of component it should be converted to in Java code. Find view by ID, r.id.button UCSD. So now we need to add listeners for these buttons because you can click on them all day and nothing is going to happen. We need to implement a listener, and to do that, one way we could do it is to, in our public class main activity, we can add an implement view.onClickListener, which listens for button clicks in your app. And I'm probably going to need to import this. Actually, the reason I'm getting the error is because I'm implementing an interface. It's requiring me to add some unimplemented methods that I didn't include. So, and that's the onClick method. And there's a way to automatically import them. Let me see if I could figure out how to do it. Generate. So right click, generate. implement methods, and it tells you view.onClickListener needs an onClick method. So that's what I need. So click OK, and it automatically adds the onClick method for me. So now we need to add the listener to the button by saying, for the button Yahoo, we can say button Yahoo that set on click listener, and we pass this to it, this button, and do the same thing for button UCSD. Button UCSD dot set on click listener. This one. Pass this. So if either button is clicked, it's going to go to the onClick method, and this is the view that is going to get passed, or the ID of that button. So we could do a switch on that ID by saying in our onClick method, switch the view that we're passing in our parameter, get ID. So we'll do a switch on the ID. And for the case where the r.id is button Yahoo, we'll have some code right there, and then we'll break. And we'll implement that in a little bit. And then we'll have another case where the r.id is button UCSD, and then we'll break out of there. And that's going to be our entire switch statement. So the code that implements each button is going to go between the case and the break statement. And before we implement these, I'm going to make each of these web views load up on their own page. So that means on a different screen. So we're going to have to create a new activity for each one.